What's up everybody, Nate here. And over the last 20 years or so, multiple recessions, a market crash, and an outright pandemic has shrunk the middle class year after year, and now it's starting to completely disappear. Well, what exactly do I mean by the middle class in the United States is disappearing? Well, the vast majority of Americans live in the middle class in the United States, or at least they did before it started to disappear. Obviously, you have the 1% of earners in the United States, and then you have the bottom 1% of earners, but right there in between all of that is the middle class. So when you hear people saying that the middle class is starting to disappear, well, it's usually not in an upwards trajectory, meaning people are getting a whole lot richer. What it usually means is people are getting a whole lot poorer in general in the US. Now, this is completely based on income and the amount that somebody is going to earn every single year, and the amount that the richest 1% in the United States are earning is a whole lot more than the middle class and the poorest Americans pretty much combined. Vast majority of Americans make most of their money from their 9-to-5 job, but their 9-to-5 job hasn't really kept up with the rate of inflation. So Americans have technically made more money over the last 20 and 30 years, but things cost a whole lot more, and the price of things is going up way faster than what the average American is making. That means they can't be middle class because they're not able to afford the average amount of goods and services in the United States anymore. The average American can't afford the average amount of things. That's causing more and more people to live paycheck to paycheck. So what exactly is going on here? Well, the first reason why the middle class has started to disappear in the United States completely is something that has been going on over the last 10, 20, and even 30 years or so. We have a lot of jobs in the United States. The most recent job numbers came out and it showed that unemployment in the US is at an over 50-year low. So that means the vast majority of Americans are employed, but just because Americans are employed doesn't mean they're making a livable wage. Part of the reason for this is because the vast majority of jobs that people have in the United States, well, those jobs haven't really changed a lot over the last 20 or 30 years. For instance, if you were a grocery clerk in 1980 making around, let's say, $12.50 an hour, well, back then that was a great wage and you could literally live off of that, buy a house, and start a family. But $12.50 an hour in 2023 won't even pay most people's bills. And like I said before, the reason for that is because a lot of jobs in the United States haven't really changed. If you look at what people were doing in a lot of jobs 20 and 30 years ago, well, they're still doing the exact same thing. Like a grocery clerk is pretty much doing the same thing that they were 20 or 30 years ago. Companies are going to kind of give you your wage and your salary based on the value that that particular position brings in, and now pretty much everybody in the United States has those baseline skills of a grocery clerk, and most people get those skills when they get a job as a teenager. So then they go into college and they have those baseline skills, where 20, 30, and 40 years ago, people didn't have those skills. So those types of jobs don't really pay much anymore. So to be a middle-class American, you have to do a whole lot more. You have to have different skills and you have to have different education that's going to set you apart from the rest of the crowd. Jobs have begun to advance again, but people need to get the skills and education to get those jobs in the first place. Once they do, they can kind of start to live that middle-class lifestyle, but it's going to take some effort, a lot more effort than previous generations may have faced. The second reason why the middle class is disappearing in the United States simply has to do with our economic cycle. If you've been around a while, then you've kind of noticed that the United States goes through periods of booms and busts. When we have booms, this is where people are spending a lot of money, a lot of hiring is happening, but there's also periods of inflation, which also sort of creates things like debt bubbles. And then we have recessions where basically all of your bad assets, all of your bad jobs, all of your bad companies, all of your bad everything in an economy basically gets drained out. Well, I'm sure you've heard the phrase, recessions create more millionaires than pretty much any other time in history. Well, that is definitely true, but recessions also create a lot more economic disparity. What I mean by that is recessions create a wider and wider gap between the haves and the have-nots. This is simply because the haves, the richest people in the United States, understand how to take advantage of a recession. They understand money, they have the financial education and the assets already, so they're able to capitalize and gain a lot more wealth. We saw this during the pandemic recession, where some of your top billionaires got even richer very, very quickly because there was a lot of wealth and a lot of money that was sort of poured into our economy all at once, and they knew what to do. But at the same time, Americans get stretched further and further because during recessions, jobs are pretty much eliminated in mass. We're starting to see this right now now in the United States with huge layoffs from a lot of your tech giants. Companies are trying to cut costs, companies are trying to figure out how they're going to save money, and usually the first thing that goes is employees. Not only is the jobs market a whole lot tougher, but wages get a whole lot lower too, because again, businesses are trying to cut costs and they're only keeping essential workers. This is also a time when businesses are cutting things like dividends, and they're also cutting wage increases in order to save the company. The vast majority of Americans use their 9-to-5 income to pay for everything in their life. So if wages are getting lower or they just lose their job in general, then that means they're going to have to figure out a way to pay the bills. And a lot of Americans already are living paycheck to paycheck, which means they leverage things like more debt and credit. They start to borrow a lot more money because they can't afford their lifestyle anymore. And that just creates further and further problems because they're not making more when they eventually do get another job. Now, the third reason why the middle class is disappearing is because pandemic stimulus is also going away. This is going to hurt Americans a lot more in 2023 and in 2024. During the pandemic, we had a big pause on a lot of mandatory payments like rent, like mortgages, student loan payments, and we had a lot of stimulus that was pouring into our economy. Now, to be completely fair here, Americans saved a ton of money. Saving rates during this time hit an all-time high because Americans had a lot of money that they were putting away. However, that was definitely not everybody. A lot of Americans used that money pretty much immediately because they didn't have a job and they needed that stimulus just to get by. But now even the Americans that were fortunate enough to keep their job during the heyday of the pandemic, well, now they're starting to go through that savings because inflation is still really high and they have to make student loan payments again and they have to make their rent payments again. All of these things are putting a tighter and tighter squeeze on Americans. That is slowly starting to squeeze out the middle class as more Americans have to spend a lot more money just to get the same things that they were buying before because of inflation. And more Americans are putting a larger chunk of their income towards their housing payment. It's over 30% right now, which is also an all-time high. Now, at the end of the day, a lot of Americans are going to be able to survive this. As long as they just continue to keep their job and make their payments, then the middle class should be able to stick around for a little while. But as soon as one thing breaks, then it's like a domino effect. If Americans can't afford to spend more at businesses, well, then businesses are not going to have the profits they need to give out raises or to keep people hired. That causes unemployment to go up, which causes issues with the stock market, which causes issues with a lot of Americans' retirement plans. And the fourth and final reason why the middle class is disappearing is because our economy is completely changing once again. A lot of the events that have been sort of leading to the middle class's demise over the last 3 or 4 years or so also are related to this concept known as the everything bubble. Without getting too complicated right now, the everything bubble essentially refers to a period of really, really low interest rates in the United States. Basically, right after the housing market crash of 2007 and 2008, the Federal Reserve dropped its interest rates to near 0%. The Fed wanted people to invest money. It wanted people to spend money so that way our economy could get back on track. This was also one of the largest and quickest economic expansions in American history, right around 2010 to 2020. You saw all of these tech startups come out of nowhere where there was missing space before, like Airbnb and Slack. That's because investors were getting really risky with a lot of their investments. They were pumping up a lot of businesses because it was really easy to do so. The money was basically free. So like I said, a lot of tech startups came from that. A lot of innovation came from that. That part of it was overall good for our economy, but at the end of the day, nothing can go up forever. And right now we are in a period where things are sort of declining because the everything bubble is starting to pop. Because there was all of this economic expansion, people were starting to make more money, people were investing more. Well, that means we also had things getting really expensive, like houses got really expensive over the last 10 years or so. Going to college got really expensive. Going on vacation got really expensive. And just living got expensive too. So all of these different markets, all of these different aspects in our economy have basically been going up and up and up and bubbling to the surface for a very long time now. Now, at the end of the 2010s, things started to flip a little bit. The Federal Reserve was starting to realize that our country was finally recovering from the Great Recession, so it was time to slowly start to raise their interest rates. That way we could sort of prevent an everything bubble collapse like we could potentially see in the future today. However, because of the pandemic, because of 15% unemployment in the United States, the Federal Reserve decided that it was best to keep interest rates at nearly 0% and offer all of these other incentives for for Wall Street and Americans. They printed a ton of money during this time. Trillions of dollars got pumped into the economy all at once, so then it was just this bigger and bigger expansion very quickly. Over the last year or so, it has been raising interest rates steadily, so now it's harder for people to invest money, it's harder for people to borrow money, it's harder for Americans to spend money. And now interest rates are higher than this generation has pretty much ever seen. So the bottom line is this generation doesn't really know how to handle it because jobs are going to be affected by this. Borrowing money like to try to get a house is going to be a whole lot harder now. That's how a lot of Americans build their wealth in the first place, is by owning a home. Might not be the best way, but that is one of the ways that the middle class does it, but it's going to get a lot harder to do that because interest rates are so high and the cost to own anything, including a home, is also much higher now. Not to mention, basic goods and services are also going up in price. So with all that being said, this is what you need to know. The average cost just to live nowadays is getting a lot higher, which means Americans need to make a whole lot more money in order to be considered part of the upper or middle class. We've started to see debt rise because Americans are struggling right now with inflation and costs going up for everything. Not only has debt and borrowing gone up, but that debt is also a lot more expensive than it used to be. Not to mention, more and more Americans, especially members of Gen Z, are starting to leverage new technologies and innovations like buy now, pay later. That is creating a financial hurricane for a lot of Americans to continue to struggle throughout 2023 and into 2024. And at the end of the day, it means that people who used to live in the middle class are just getting poorer and poorer. Now, let me be extremely clear here. This doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to happen to you, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to happen. You can't control what major corporations do, you can't control what the federal government is going to do either, and you certainly can't control the economy. The only thing that you can control is your own money and your own lifestyle. And if you want to try to prevent falling out of the middle class and actually build your wealth in 2023, then these are some steps you can take. First thing that you can do is just learn how money works. Learn how our economic system works. Learn how finance works in the United States in order to financially educate yourself and know exactly how to handle your money. Money management is extremely important here. The last thing you want to do, whether it's a recession or pretty much any time, is go into a lot of debt, because that is going to take away from your earning potential 3, 5, and 10 years from now. Money management and financial education is going to help you to sort of capitalize on opportunities. Like I said before, the rich get richer in recessions, and the reason for that is because they are educated and they know what steps they need to take. You can follow those exact same steps if you have the right skills and knowledge. One of the other things you can do is earn a lot more money. This could be through side hustles. This could be in learning a new skill in order to get promoted at your job. You can also do this through investing, like becoming a real estate investor or investing in stocks that give you back an annual dividend. Investing is key here because you can't just save your life away and expect to become wealthy at some point. I think a lot of Americans got this wrong over the last 3 or 4 years or so. They saved every penny, but now with inflation so high, all of that savings is getting quickly eroded. The last thing you can do is watch your lifestyle. Now, I want you to have all of the things that you want in this world. I want you to be able to go on vacation and afford to buy a new car. I want you to be able to do all of that, but you have to decide if you want that today or you want it tomorrow. There's nothing wrong with buying things. Money is here to be spent. It is one of the tools that helps us get the things that we want in life, but you have to be able to afford whatever you want to buy. Otherwise, if you buy something that you can't afford, well, you're taking away from your wealth earning potential in the future, because now you have a lot more debt that you need to pay off, which may make you happy today, but you just need to decide what is best for you. The middle class has been disappearing for a very long time now, but by taking steps today to better your financial education and to slowly build your wealth, you might be able to avoid disappearing with it. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Do you think that the middle class is going to continue to shrink in the United States, or do you think that the middle class is going to be a whole lot better off just a few years down the road? That is it for me, everybody. Be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.